Hey, good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Today's session will be an hour with time for Q&A throughout the session. The webinar will be recorded for future viewing. Please note that participation in this webinar qualifies for free CME credit, and the CME link we will provide at the end of the webinar. Any resources mentioned during today's call will be made available after the presentation. We do encourage question and comments, so please submit those using the chat function. If you'd like a question shared anonymously in the chat, please select to send it only to myself, Lindsay Hanlon, and I will share that anonymously at the end. The presenter today has no financial relationships to disclose, and this webinar is approved for 1.0 AMA PRA Category 1 credit. So I am super pleased today to introduce our presenter for today, Dr. Joann Schaefer. I'm sure many of you already are familiar with her, but Dr. Joann Schaefer is a seasoned physician executive with nearly 30 years in healthcare. She served as Nebraska's Chief Medical Officer, a family medicine associate professor, a CMO and EVP at a major payer, and president of a private capital healthcare company. She's also led in venture capital board and sits on several community boards. A grateful liver transplant recipient since 2008, she brings lived experience to every leadership role. And known for building high impact teams and transformation, Dr. Schaefer focuses on improving public health, growing businesses, and driving results. Passionate about physician and executive coaching as well as consulting, she's committed to helping leaders thrive and create lasting, patient-centered change in the healthcare ecosystem. So welcome, Dr. Schaefer. I'm so excited to have you today. I've got to hear this presentation before, so I'm really excited. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see some faces this morning. We're going to talk about your inner critic and how to tame it a little bit. And this will apply to your patients as well. We'll have one slide up there just to how to aim some of this right to patient care as well. But you'll see how this just applies to you and how you talk to yourself. And you can apply this to your kids, to your spouses. It's just kind of a handy little tool once I teach you how to do it. So hopefully this will be nice and easy. You're all highly trained physicians. This is, some of you might even already know this. It's just a good refresher. So you can go ahead, Lindsay. So many of you have seen this life cycle wheel, and this is something that we do actually as LifeBridge coaches when you call in. It's something that we can go through with you. I use it sometimes I don't, but this is a really helpful one when we start diving into some of your inner critic. And all these things are in here. You fill out the wheel, you kind of grade yourself on how well you're doing. So on a 1 to 10, in these categories: family, friends, personal growth, marriage and partnership, spirituality, um, fun and recreation, physical environment, all of these things that that encompass your life. How do you score yourself and how you're doing? Not everyone can be a 10 in all things. There's a give and take. Life is a balance of all of these things. So you start to score yourself on where you're at. And sometimes you do this in coaching because it's really helpful, because sometimes people come to us and they don't exactly know what is off balance and where they're not giving their time. And when we go through this wheel, sometimes it pulls it out. So that's why we use it. I'm using it today just to say, if you go through these things and you start saying, well, I'm scoring myself a 1 over here, I'm interested in what that voice is telling you about why you're scoring yourself a 1. So is there any judgment there? What's that voice inside telling you? Are you just saying, you're just being honest with yourself and saying, hey, I'm a 1 down here because I haven't paid attention to my health? Or is there a voice in there saying some really cruel and unnice things to yourself when you're doing it? You can go to the next slide, Lindsay. So common areas of self-judgment are also things like your body image, intelligence, competence. You know, how many times do you say things like, oh, if only I were smarter, or gee, that was a dumb thing to do, or I'm so stupid, or attractiveness of, you know, picking on how you look. I'm fat. I'm out of shape. I don't like the way my hair looks, my skin. I'm bald. I'm short. I'm tall. I'm lanky. I'm all the negative comments that you make towards your body. Creativity, you know, picking on yourself for not being creative. Confidence, not having enough confidence in certain situations, or wishing that you had more. So you're being really negative towards yourself in these situations. Communications, not being able to say the right thing at the right time, walking away and really picking on yourself for not having the right words, and losing an argument, or feeling like you didn't argue enough, or feeling that you argued too much, or that you were mean, or that you were too nice. How many times in your inner voice, your inner critic, are you just picking on yourself? Those are the things that I'm interested in. And how can we tame that voice? Listening, emotional intelligence, and physical prowess. Those are other areas. You can go to the next slide. So does that inner critic show up? And does it say things like, you should have, you could have, you were such a, why aren't you more? If only you were, why can't you just, and yada, yada, yada. And does your inner critic look a little bit like these characters? You can go to the next slide. Okay, so now what? I want everyone to close your eyes for just a minute and just be quiet and close your eyes for a second. Lindsay, you can go to the next slide. Sorry about that. Okay. So keep your eyes closed, and I just want you to rub your hands together and make some warmth in between your hands. Just rub them together really fast. And I want you to take your right hand and rub it on the side of your neck. And just give yourself a little gentle massage on the right side of your neck. And then I want to take your left hand and rub it on the other side of your neck. Reach all the way up, rub the bottom base of your head. Get your traps really good. Just a little self-massage. Take a deep breath in. And now just listen to what I have to say. One day, the sun admitted, I am just a shadow. I wish I could show you the infinite incandescence that has cast my brilliant image. I wish I could show you, when you are lonely or in darkness, the astonishing light of your own being. Okay, you can open your eyes now. I think that's just a beautiful little poem that I love to share. And a word on that little exercise. I love to give this as a little tip for people who have, and then maybe intermittent stress or anxiety or anything. I do it just in this, just to break up all that negativity that we just talked before we go into the learning. But this is a great thing that you can do anytime that you are in the throes of something stressful in the day. You know, just seeing patients, it's really busy, you're in a meeting that's really stressful, you can quietly warm your hands and then give yourself a self massage. No one will even know what you're doing, but it is a great way to kind of lower the temperature of anything that's going on internally. But you can do it anytime for yourself, but it is a really great way to kind of break the cycle of any sort of anxiety or anything that's going on inside. So I just give that to you today for a little trick. But beautiful poem, just to kick off today. You can go to the next slide. So, we're going to just talk about, we're going to have a little talk with your inner critic. So remember, it's lonely and it's anxious and it has no power. And it's a good thing to remember that that little voice inside of you was put there early on as a way to protect you from something. So it's deep part of your brain. It was there, developed when you were a kid, and it started to react to things and as a warning to, don't touch that stove again. Don't, it's hot. Remember it's hot. Don't touch. Why did you touch the stove? It's hot. Don't forget that's a hot stove. Don't touch it. So it's there and it's designed to protect you, but it can get out of control. And so sometimes, it's a self-regulating piece of us, and we want that inner critic there to sometimes be there to protect us, to guide us. But as physicians, we're very, driven. We've been in a competitive environment almost our entire adulthood, from, college, high school, college, medical school, residency. We have to be perfect. We can't make mistakes. That inner critic, that's a ripe atmosphere for that inner critic to grow. And sometimes as we get out in the world still, it's hard to shut that off. And so we can let it run wild. And so part of this today is just to learn how to shut it off, because it does a lot of damage and we don't need that kind of voice in our head. So it's important to examine where that voice came from. Is it driven from a particular experience in your life, or a person that was that negative voice in your life, constantly on you or criticizing you? It's just an important thing to acknowledge. And then when there is a negative voice about a certain thing, or you're being hypercritical about yourself, that inner voice is on you about something, is there any part of it that is true? But you don't need to believe everything that it says. And I'm going to give you an example, because you want to know if it's helpful in any way. And here's the example that I want to give you. So there was a time where I was giving a lot of talks when I was the CMO of the state. And my slides, I usually manage my slides, but one time I handed over my slides for a talk that I gave a lot. And I asked them just to, pretty them up a little bit. Don't change the content, but if you could just add, a little bit more color, just zhuzh them up a little bit is what they did. And they did that. And they didn't change the content at all. I asked them to do it, but the next day when I was going to give this talk that I had given many times, I was running late. I didn't have time to review the slides. And I got there to the presentation, handed them my little thumb drive, back when you could do that, handed my thumb drive to them. They popped them in. I started giving the presentation. And just because the slides were rearranged and it was different color and some new pictures and stuff, the content was exactly the same, but it tripped me up. And I was stunned, and it wasn't flowing. I still did a great job on the presentation. I even got a standing ovation. This is a well-tuned and thing that I gave all the time. And I still got a standing ovation from the audience. But to me, it felt like I did a terrible job. And when I got off that stage, my inner critic was going nuts. And I kept saying to myself, you did a terrible job. And, so as an example, let's have a talk with my inner critic. So, okay, was it terrible? No. No, it wasn't terrible. I got a standing ovation. The content was delivered. It was well received by the audience. Could I have done a better job? Yes, I could have reviewed the slides beforehand so I wouldn't have been as stressed out. I could have been early. I could have looked at them so I knew what was going to come up with the new slides, how they appeared. I could have done that. And I didn't. So yes, I could have done a better job, but it wasn't horrible. And my inner critic needed to just damp down a little bit. So it was being helpful in a way that it was saying, hey, you could do better. You could have not had these things happen. But I did a great job, and I didn't need to be so hard on myself. And so it was helpful in some way. I could listen to it with kindness and compassion instead of being angry and frustrated with myself. And so I offer this as an example to you because this is how you start to tame your inner critic. You have to have this dance with it. You have to listen to it a little bit for any sort of truth or thing that could be helpful, and then immediately discard the rest. I'm going to go to the next slide and we're going to go through that again. Oh, first, I want you to, these are all the areas. I just want you to have in mind some of the top 3 things that you think of that are, at the top of what you are picking on yourself about, where your inner critic shows up the most. Is it your family and friends? Is it your finances? Is it your attractiveness, your marriage? Is it your emotional intelligence in situations? When you look at this list, what are the 3 things that you're thinking of? You're not going to do any sort of exercise you're sharing with anybody. I just want you to have these top in mind so you can think about this when we go through the next slide. So have a couple in mind. This is some of the things that we work through in coaching, by the way, on LifeBridge, when we have these conversations about things that are truly bothering people. And we walk through these so that we can get an idea of how to process through some of this inner critic stuff so people can live a more free life, feeling less, guilty and less bothered by this. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So how do you stop it? First and foremost, you got to recognize that it's there, that thought that is bothering you. And one of the first things we ask people is, where do you feel that in your body? Because sometimes people feel it right here in the throat when they think about these things, like that last slide when I asked you, think about those 3 things or where it bothers you the most. Where did you feel it? Did you feel it right here in your throat? Did you feel it here in your chest? Did you feel it in your stomach? Because these are deeply rooted in your, in your, excuse me, a frog in my throat. It's deeply rooted in your neuroendocrine system. So you're going to have a response. And so when you recognize where you feel it in your throat, your chest, or your gut, just recognizing where you feel it is part of disempowering it. Because most of the time, when people are dealing with their inner critic, they're not even aware of the biological impact that it has. And so when you start to recognize, gosh darn it, every time that voice comes out, I feel it in my throat. I get this tightness. Just by recognizing that alone, you're going to start to push it away. So I'm asking you to really turn into the somatic portion of what this feels like to be that hard on yourself. So if you know where that hit you in your body, that's good. I would ask you to start paying attention when you're hard on yourself, when that negative critic is coming out. Where do you feel it? So that's his first step. Then I want you to start thinking about who is saying this, and I want you to pretend it's not you. I want you to pretend that it's another person. You can make it any person. I want you to put it in the 3rd person voice, like a bad teacher in the past, or an angry sibling, or some bully out there. I want you to just take that inner critic and I want you to pull it out of your mind and put it in the 3rd person out there. And you're just going to pretend like this is the person that's intent is to make your life miserable. And I want you to picture that in your head. It's not you that's saying it, it's somebody else. Remember, we're trying to get this person to stop talking in your head. So the first thing we want to do is pull it out of your head and put it over there. Now, just as if you were in person fighting against this person, I want you to build a case against that in your head. Just like I was talking about with doing my PowerPoint, and I started arguing a case against it. I was like, I got an ovation. The stuff was delivered. I delivered the information needed to be in that PowerPoint. The audience liked it. I want you to build a case against whatever your inner critic is saying. So if you're picking on yourself about your body image, or your health. I want you to find the evidence against you that you're okay. And I want you to fight against that bully over there about the things that are not true. And you can do this with any topic that you're not comfortable with. You find the things that are true and you fight against that bully. And you can, again, like I said, you can acknowledge the things that were otherwise helpful. And over time, that language between you and that bully softens, and you can have this conversation with this third person. You're not going crazy. It's not like you're talking to somebody else in the room, but you can have this conversation with that inner critic that is softer, kinder, and you're acknowledging the help that they're trying to give you and keep those negative thoughts away. It just takes time and practice so that you're constantly reframing this into a positive, helpful voice instead of a negative, nagging voice. You just put it in the third person. You have an argument with them or a disagreement, build a case against them. And you can also do this in a journal. You can write it out if journaling is your thing, or you can just talk it out and reason it out or think it out. But so first you want to recognize where you're feeling it in your body, put it in the third person, have an argument, build your case against it, and keep doing this over time with each thing that's bothering you. It takes practice, but it's a mind shift change, and this is how you get to that mind shift change. Lindsay, you can go to the next slide. So how can this help with patients? It's sort of the same things. You know, they have negative thoughts about themselves as common. It's as common as for them as it is for us. And sometimes it can get in the way of them wanting to be compliant with chronic medication adherence or being in a medical program because they have the same negative feelings about themselves and then wanting to be compliant with these programs. So it's worth asking them about their negative feelings about this stuff, because you might hear things like, what's the use? Is this making any difference for me? I don't feel any different. Why bother? So you just have to probe and ask these questions. How are they feeling about this? And if you get these negative thoughts and how it pertains to their health and longevity, you can tease this out, and you can get a sense of if they have unworthiness or shame that you might want to poke at. And the reason for doing this is, you know, one, you can help them with this mind shift change, and you are probably already doing this and you don't even know it. But if not, if you're probing and this is not going well, these are great ways to introduce patients to mental health therapy and getting them to counseling. You know, and something that's a little bit bigger if it's sliding into more than just a mind shift change. But you know, it's all about awakening that inner cheerleader and getting to be compliant with something and seeing a future and what you're trying to do for their health. But you know, it doesn't have to be full-on anxiety or depression. Sometimes it's just taming that inner critic about what they have at their hands. And that little mind shift change can help them see a future in something that they wouldn't otherwise see. You can go to the next slide. So developing your inner champion instead will help recognize your intrinsic self-worth and value. You can recognize that you're okay. In fact, you're actually quite perfect as you are. And this just takes time and patience and working with that inner critic. But if you can, it will encourage you to be more of who you are authentically and more comfortable in your own skin. And it's your inner champion can be more like the ideal supportive parent you always wished you had or that you still had. And the goal is that it can be this older, wiser version that is calm and gentle and helps you grow and better yourself without being mean, angry, or harsh. It's a mentor who has your best interest in mind. And that's a really important thing. You want your inner critic there to be a guide and to be helpful and to be thinking, just gentle, but be thinking of your best interest, being, guarding, pointing out, being helpful for things that are dangerous, things that are, warning, but you don't want it to be picking on you all the time. And that's on you to change that into, a wiser version and not have something so negative on you. And it can be done, and you'll feel so much better for it. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to have close your eyes again. Go to the next slide. The universe took its time on you, crafted you to offer the world something different from everyone else. When you doubt how you were created, you doubt an energy greater than both of us. Okay, you can open your eyes. So, what would it be like to truly cherish myself? Is what I want you to ask yourself. And with that, um, we're ready for questions.
Right, you know, meet there. So we do have a few that were through the chat or came in earlier. So you talked a little bit about this earlier, but if you want to just touch on anything additional, do you incorporate this into practice with patients, and has that been successful? And if so, what way?
Well, how you can incorporate it with patients is, like I said before, is when you sense that they're not being compliant or that they're hesitant about a patient or about a plan, it's important to ask how they feel about themselves and going through this. Like, are they having negative thoughts about a particular plan or their medications or a treatment regimen? And ask them how they feel about it. When they have negative thoughts, it's just important to probe into that. Ask them, what are you thinking about those about that? And they can answer anything, but when they answer something to the negative, go through the same thing. Ask them, where do you feel it, in your body? And ask them, the kind of the origin about the negative. And I'll give you an example. Like if they're, well, I don't see how it's going to make any difference. And it's like, well, when you say that, when you express to me you don't feel like this is going to make any difference, where does that conjure up any feeling in your body? Well, I get anxious about it. Well, tell me more about that. Well, I get anxious that all these medicines I'm taking and I'm not going to ever get any better. Well, this is the first step of getting you better. And you can start to play with the idea of them, taking the diabetes and hypertension medications are going to help them get better. Um, and what would it take for them to feel better about the medicines that they need to take and be on a road to accepting the medications. And I think that part of, you will know is when a patient is starting to shift to wanting to be compliant, you'll know that um, you're being more successful with their inner critic. I don't know, I don't think I'm explaining that well, but I think it's just important to address them or address it with them about their negative feelings with the program of whatever plan you have with them. Because if they're feeling negative about whatever you have prescribed, or whatever you're doing, they're less likely to be compliant. So if you can get them to express to you those negative feelings, the more likely you will have to be able to switch them to be compliant. I hope that makes sense.
We had another question here. How do you spot and counteract jealousy, envy, or sabotage from your leadership and maybe defend yourself from it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when you're in a leadership role, so the question was, how do you spot counteract jealousy and envy and sabotage from your leadership and defend yourself from it? It's a complicated question. So um, I'd say that probably your inner critic is pointing out several things about you. You're feeling not supported in that position. You're feeling that your leadership is doing things to you to make you um, feel this way. And so I think it's important to probably, I'd have to know a little bit more about the situation, but we can only own our own behaviors and our own self, if that makes sense. So when you have um, when you have leadership that is making you feel a certain way, it's important to tease apart the actions that are happening and really focus on what is true. So because that might be your inner critic or your ego trying to fill in blanks and say things are happening that aren't really happening. And so I would encourage you to really look at every situation and assume assume positive first, and really like write out a whole scenario of what just happened, and then cross out every single thing that is like an adjective or a descriptor of the situation, where it only gives you the facts, so that you can look at a scenario where it's just factual. And sometimes that can help you realize that maybe the in the leadership role, they're not doing the things that you think they are. And then sometimes it becomes very clear that they are doing those things. And sometimes the most important thing is to have a conversation with them about the actions that are making you feel that way. And at the end of the day, if you don't want to have the conversation about the things that they're doing, which is understandable, um, sometimes it's most effective to not let that get in. Um, and, you know, if when we do this in coaching, we can do a whole, hour talking about what you're willing to live with and what you're willing to not live with. And so there's a lot in that question. I hope I gave you something. Yeah. Jill?
So, and it seems like women are very critical of other women. And sometimes if I disagree with a woman, I try to maybe take a breath and not jump, right in. Try more with other women, especially to be very positive, because I think so often women are critical of other women, and we really want to build each other up and support each other as much as we can, if that makes sense.
I think that's wonderful. I think, the more we can all try to support and build each other up, the better off we will be. There's gossip and petty um, petty negative thoughts and comments about other people are just not helpful to anybody. And there's a fine line between saying something that is out of love and compassion towards somebody that you're worried about them, and then gossip. So, you know, I think we can hold ourselves in a position of, why are we saying something about somebody? Is it to be helpful because you're concerned and it's out of love, and you're sharing it with someone because you're worried about that person? Or are you sharing it because you want to gossip? And so, I mean, that's one way that, you know, in the workplace, you can espouse those feelings and see if you can get people to come along with you. But it is very hard. I mean, that's a whole other webinar.
We did have another question that came in. How can we use this mindset outside of medicine, such as with recreational sports or physical fitness?
Yeah, absolutely. The completely applicable to that. In fact, some of those lists did include things like, you know, physical fitness and health and whatnot. So if your negative critic is saying, you know, gosh, I just can't hit those goals like I used to, or, you know, my muscle weakness or is at an all-time high, and I'm not hitting the weights like I used to, you know, all of those negative things, same exact thing applies. You know, you pull it out, it's like a coach over here and you're arguing with the coach and you're having that, and it's like, well, okay, I it is true. I'm getting older. My muscle mass is decreasing. I'm biologically programmed to be doing less. I mean, it's not all me. And then it's true. I'm working out less. I don't have as much time. Um, so those things are true. I could put in more time if I wanted to. And maybe I will. Maybe I'll make a commitment to be in the gym more, or, you know, I'll join a sports team, you know, recreational sports team, and I'll commit more time to that. Maybe that's true. Um, but at the end of the day, that I'm doing the best that I can. And so, you know, that's one way to calm that inner critic. The other part is, you know, if you're a highly trained athlete and you're starting to slip, that's a whole different conversation about, yes, taming that inner critic, but you're trying to get back on the top of your game. So you're going to be doing that. You're going to be doing visualization and all those other tricks that you can to get really back at the top of your game. But any of these negative thoughts can be challenged. Remember, pull it to the third person, challenge them, quiet them down, and then focus on the positive and what you can do to get back to what you want to go, what your goal is to accomplish. So any of those negative thoughts can be switched to that, including, you know, the ones that we talked about, you know, with when I went through with the leadership and defending yourself and the sabotage, like any of those negative thoughts too, you can flip the narrative on that and say, you know, I'm strong, I'm confident, I deserve to be here. You know, all of those positive things you can say to yourself as a physician who is feeling like they don't belong in the role that they're in, or they're being beaten down from above, and you want to get through that. You know, it's about constant talking to yourself about the I'm strong, I'm competent, I deserve to be here, I am a good leader, I am a good physician. You know, those things are important to say to yourself. It's not if you think there's a magic thing to being in a leadership role, there isn't. There's a lot of positive self-talk in there, positive more than negative. I've done it my whole career. You've got to be able to say to yourself, I'm good at what I do, and I know what I'm doing, and I deserve to be here, and I'm okay at this. I'm doing a good job, and fight down the negative critic when it shows up. So so I hope that's helpful. In the questions that we had. Are there any other questions? We are ahead of time for.
Well, while we wait for any other questions, I did just want to share, as a reminder, you do have these resources and you've got great coaches that are trained in doing this. And LifeBridge Nebraska offers free and confidential peer-to-peer physician coaching to all Nebraska licensed physicians. So you can call that confidential line up there and you can be paired with a coach or select who'd you like to work with. Our coaches are great. Dr. Schaefer is obviously one of our coaches, and a lot of what she talked about today, it's great concepts and bring in your specific issues that you want to talk through to work one-on-one with a coach. Also, it's confidential. So following the passage of legislation in 2023, LifeBridge is the only program in the state protected under statute. So physicians that participate in this program are protected against discovery of participation in the program, are not obligated to disclose your involvement to any healthcare facility, hospital, medical staff personnel, accreditation, government agency, any other entity. And then finally, this program currently remains at no cost for our physicians, thanks to the generosity of our sustainability partners that are listed here. So we're very appreciative of that. But I will open it back up if there's any other final questions while you've got Dr. Schaefer on here.